Hi everyone, it's your friend Justin. Welcome to another episode of GoodCast, a podcast produced by Goodwill Industries of Fort Worth. It's a show where we highlight success stories made possible by donations from folks just like you. For this episode, we're going to take a bit more of a serious tone, a call to action if you will. December 21st marks the winter solstice. It's the longest night of the year, and the first day of winter. But we also recognize it as Homeless Persons Memorial Day, or National Homeless Persons Remembrance Day. This observance, which began in 1990, urges communities across the country to come together to remember those who have died without stable housing, and to call for meaningful policy changes to ensure that no life is lived or lost in homelessness. Now, there are a couple ways to look at poverty, from a socioeconomic perspective to a global health crisis. To put it simply, poverty is something that affects a lot of people, and its impact can be felt through generations. If we look at the 2019 census specifically, the official poverty rate was 10.5% and affected 34 million people. Now, at the time that this is being recorded, we don't have access to the 2020 census reports, but according to a study published in October by Columbia University, that number has increased by at least 8 million individuals due to the impact of COVID-19, and has especially affected people of color. If we want to break it down further, we can look into the 2020 annual report from the Tarrant County Homeless Coalition to learn more about the folks in our area. I'll be making a couple references to this document throughout the episode, so I would highly recommend you check it out since we won't be able to cover everything it has to offer. All of that brings us to a question and the main topic of our conversation today. What does Goodwill do for people experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk of homelessness? For that, we can turn to Goodwill Works. I know it's been a wild year, so I won't ask you to remember all the way back to our first episode, but I am going to play a clip from our interview with David to get the program's origin story. And then we'll hear from Joe Tomlinson, who's been with Goodwill Works since its inception, and close us out with a success story or two. For context, in our first episode, we covered the basics of what a nonprofit is. How do they work? How do they get funding? And what does our organization do specifically to help people in our community? Goodwill is unique in that we have our retail department to fund our programs, but we also receive funding from other sources, both on a state, local, and federal level, which is what led into this conversation about Goodwill Works.
So Goodwill is, unlike a lot of other nonprofit organizations, we're very blessed that we have our donated goods retail program, which brings in a revenue because it allows us to self-fund a lot of programs that we do. If they become very popular, if they really work well, then we're able to leverage that and receive grants from foundations or grants from the government to help us make those dollars go further. A really good example of this is our Goodwill Works program, which is our services for the homeless. This started several years ago, and I get to pat myself on the back every once in a while because I was down with my church. We were feeding the homeless in Fort Worth, and I had my daughter with me. She was probably about 11 or 12 at the time, and she looked up at me and she said, "Dad, what does Goodwill do to help these people who are homeless?" And I really couldn't honestly answer her that we were doing a lot. I mean, we definitely served people who were homeless at the time, but we weren't doing anything to really have a coordinated outreach for the homeless population. So I started visiting with some of the executive directors at Union Gospel Mission, Presbyterian Night Shelter, and I was asking them, who's doing your job placement for the people who are living in your shelters? They needed the help of Goodwill. So we self-funded one person. We hired them with the proceeds generated off of our retail stores. That person went to the shelters, spent a couple days at the shelter, a couple days at another shelter, helping people find jobs. That program was so successful that we were then able to go out and apply for grants to help us grow that program. Today, we have 18 people working in that program. Since its inception, we've served 4,500 people with job training, and these are people who are experiencing homelessness. And we've been able to put 1,900 of them to work, which is incredible. And that's just a great example of how we can start off something really small, self-funded through our retail stores, and then leverage that success to get grants and other support to grow those programs.
My favorite part of that is the direct action. You're going and talking not only to the people that are experiencing homelessness, but the organizations that are helping them, in addition to that research, those numbers. So nothing really feels like a gamble when you're launching these programs.
Exactly. A lot of that just comes from our experience in the community. We've been serving this community for many, many years, and we have a lot of great partnerships in the community. We work well with a lot of other organizations, and that's what it's all about. We all have the same goal, which is to help people.
If we take a second to compare the Tarrant County report I mentioned earlier, as well as our own 2019 annual report, we can see some interesting statistics. Now, obviously, there's going to be some overlap, but the Tarrant report breaks down services into the following categories: prevention, diversion, outreach, emergency shelter, rapid exit, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and permanent housing. I want to state right off the bat that Goodwill Works isn't a housing service, but case managers and trainers within our program can refer clients to community resources similar to these other programs. Looking back at that report, 35 agencies across Tarrant County served 10,645 individuals through 117 programs. And if we look back at our own numbers, in 2019, Goodwill Fort Worth served 2,295 individuals experiencing homelessness, placing or referring them to any of our 23 unique programs. Like I mentioned in the last episode, when you're dealing with these kind of numbers, it can sometimes be difficult to remember what they represent. Homelessness and poverty are ongoing issues being further escalated by a global pandemic. It's going to take a lot of hard work and change to prevent this growing trend. With that being said, we're going to turn to Joe Tomlinson to really break down the fantastic job that Goodwill Works is doing in our community.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Tomlinson. I'm the Goodwill Works supervisor. I've been with Goodwill Fort Worth for just a little shy of 5 years.
Have you been with Goodwill Works that entire time, or have you?
I've been with Goodwill Works since it came on, yeah.
Okay. David, in our first episode, kind of touched on the program's origins. What was that like, being one of the first Goodwill Works employees?
It was challenging, I guess would be the way to put it. Because I'd never worked with a strictly homeless population before, so that was new. And Goodwill Fort Worth had never had this program before. I understand it had been held by a couple of other agencies before we got it, so it's not brand new, but we're the only ones who have kept it this long by succeeding at it. But it was quite a challenge because at True Worth Place, which exists now as an excellent asset down in Lancaster, that did not exist. They hadn't built that yet when we were there. We were literally, it was myself and a intake specialist quite often riding around in my car looking for shelters to go find people and talk to them. Took a little while to get the population, the community, aware that we were there to come and let us help them. And so we did that a lot. We got into a couple of places. We went to one transitional housing program run by the state. And we were there for 2 years before anybody realized it. The state kind of flipped out. They asked us how we got in. I said, we knocked on the door. That's how we got in.
Right. Uh-huh.
And we worked with them because we expanded it where it's not just your standard, it's not just your typical homeless population that Works provides services to now. We take care of this homeless population, or these folks who are living in shelters, the people who are living on the street, the people who are in danger of experiencing homelessness. The standards were homeless models, but then we expanded as well into the criminal justice system, where we work with people who are transitioning from being incarcerated back into the community because for a period of time they are homeless. So we just kept growing and looking for different opportunities, expanding into everything that we could find that would fit into our guidelines. And little by little, we ended up serving, I think last year, like 1,200 people.
How do you describe your job to people who aren't familiar with, this kind of work, or how do you explain it to clients?
Our primary function is to help people become self-sufficient, to reach independence, to take care of themselves and their families. We do that by connecting them with employment that will pay a wage that will allow them to become self-sufficient, have some benefits that they can actually take care of themselves. We don't, we assist them in other ways. We also refer to other agencies if they need things that we don't have. And we work with our partners in the community to help with everything as a wraparound service. So we access everything to help them with the ultimate goal of everybody being able to take care of themselves. Ideally, if we do this really well, we'll work ourselves out of a job.
I know doing research for Relaunch specifically and talking about individuals coming out of incarceration, when we get into things like recidivism rates, right? A lot of studies have shown that while not being like the solution, finding and keeping employment is a really huge factor in staying out of the prison system. Do you find that same kind of logic applies to homelessness?
It does, because most of the people who are experiencing homelessness have had some dealings with the justice system, quite often also with MHO, mental health, with mental health issues that they're dealing with. They need assistance, and that can come in the form of assistance by a clinical professional, but it also leads back to them being able to get the self-esteem they have from taking care of themselves, from being able to pay your own rent, to have your car, to go buy your food, to do things that we think of as just day-to-day stuff. It can be a little more difficult for them, and that's whether they're coming out of an incarceration situation or whether they're just a regular, someone living in a shelter or in a tent. Those people need an opportunity, and we help provide that opportunity by coaching them and guiding them to, here's a job that we can help you get, and supporting them. We keep track of our clients for 90 days after they go to work, because maybe we got someone a job, but it's not the right one. We don't want them to just quit and disappear, so we work with them to keep that job while we get them to the one they need. While we aren't mental health professionals at all, we don't do that. We can't connect them with what they need in addition to the employment services that we offer. And then a lot of it is just being there. Sometimes they just need someone to talk to, and we serve that purpose too.
That is one factor that I have really appreciated about our a lot of our job placement programs that are tailored to specific audiences, whether you're talking about VetWorthy or Relaunch or Goodwill Works, is that access to community resources. Because I think once you have a fully diversified support system, it really opens the way for success. What does normal operation of Goodwill Works look like?
A normal operation, I'll give you an example. If we have a new client show up, we check basic stuff. They have to have they have to have their I-9 document. They have to have the same documents they'd have to accept a job. Mm-hmm. So we check that they have an ID, a social security card. If you're a male born since 1960, then you have to be in selective service, stuff like this. We make sure those are our basics. Then we get them enrolled in the program once we have all their documents. Then we work with a trainer. The trainers in Goodwill Works will help them build resumes, help them get their online presence set up. They'll have an Indeed resume before they leave, which is then sent into Indeed, and it starts working on their programs on its own, looking for jobs for them, matching them with their computers, their algorithms. So it does that. The trainer starts with all that. Next, they work with a case manager. The case manager will make sure that, you're ready to go. You've got everything you need. You got your resume up. What else, what do you think you need? Okay, maybe they need interview clothes. Let's get you some interview clothes. Okay, let's do that. You got an interview coming up? You got your clothes? Okay, let's get you a bus pass. That way you can get there. And then we got a business developer who's going to be out there working for that client, matching that client with jobs and employers that he knows. And that's where the really good part of this program comes in. If a business developer calls one of our clients or sends an email to one of our clients and says, Jane, we need you to put in an application at XYZ company and then let me know you've done it. Mm-hmm. Jane does that, lets the business developer know that she does. The business developer most of the time will have a good enough relationship with the employer that he or she will contact that employer, and the chances are very good that that resume will be pulled to the top of the stack, and quite often we get an interview and lead to employment. And that's just because of the intervention that our BDs do, our business developers do with the employer community, and the rest of us are there to support all that throughout the whole way.
So are those the three main positions within Goodwill Works?
Four. Yeah, there's intake, trainer, case management, business developer. But the way it's set up right now, they're handed off from one to the other. It goes in a certain flow. Mm-hmm. So, if you worked with your intake person is going to do the paperwork. The trainer is going to help you with the resume. The case manager is going to get rid of any other barriers that there are, and the business developer is going to connect them to employers. And most of our staff are cross-trained pretty well.
What is the sort of transition period afterwards look like? Because you said once they're in a job, that's not the end of the story. You're doing follow-ups. What happens after?
After that, we simply touch base with them. We make sure that they know that we're there to help them. That'll be a case manager usually touching base with them at 30, 60, and 90 days just to make sure everything's going okay. And then also just being there should they ever need something to make sure they realize if they call us, if we don't have it, we'll find it and we'll get it for you. And, so if you're having trouble, let us know. If you need work boots, let us know. We'll just what we don't have, we can usually get a hold of through our partners one way or another.
What do you think is the largest misconception that people have about homeless populations?
That they're damaged beyond repair. They're not. Like right now, let's take a single mom during the time of this pandemic. She loses her job. Well, she loses her job. That makes it difficult. She gets some assistance, but then she may lose her car. So now she can't go look for work or go to work or doesn't know how to. Now she lost her car and lost her job. Eventually she loses her housing. Now her and the children are out on the street and having to deal with that or having to find some other, way to live. And it just snowballs on you. Not every person we work with or every person in the who's experienced homelessness in our community is someone who has failed. We have people with bachelor's and master's degrees who have gotten into situations like that. We've had to help them. We've got people who have been doing just great, and then something happened. Could be anything, something that they caused, could be something just that came out of nowhere. These are good people who have fallen in a bad way.
Going back to that same report, the Tarrant County Homeless Coalition lists the top 2 reasons for homelessness as unemployment and the inability to pay rent. The most pressing issue right now? The uncertainty of whether or not people across the country will be evicted come January 1st. At the time of this recording, the eviction moratorium set in place by the CDC will expire with the new year, which can create a whole list of new circumstances for families. Goodwill Works also serves people at risk of homelessness to try and prevent that. So you would say, within the coming months, programs like Goodwill Works that focus on, people who are experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk are going to become even more vital.
Yes, definitely. If there was a time for us to be out there as best we can, it's right now. And we have the tools, thankfully. In 1918, we didn't have an internet or anything like that. We couldn't do this. Now we can work from home, work from virtual outposts, things like that. But yeah, there's never been a better time for us to be doing this particular program at Goodwill in Fort Worth than right now to be the most used to people who really are going to need us.
I know that this has been a particularly heavy episode, but at the end of the day, Goodwill is an organization that was made to serve others. And if there's ever been a time where those services are needed, as Joe mentioned, it would be now. It would be disingenuous to not mention the critical point that we're at as a community. And it's something that I've strived to accomplish with this show. Hopefully I've done that. I have one more message from Joe regarding the next couple of weeks or months, but first I want to take a moment to highlight success stories that were made possible with Goodwill Works. These stories serve 2 purposes, both to celebrate the individuals at its center and provide hope for others that their barriers can be overcome. Marisol Caro came to Goodwill through True Worth Place, a day shelter Goodwill Works partners with in March of last year. She'd faced homelessness, depression, and a criminal background, but was excited to learn about the free programs and services available through our organization. She took digital skills assessments as well as job readiness training. And through Workforce Solutions of Tarrant County, she received funding to earn her forklift certification with NTI. That certification found her a job, and a year later, she was able to find a home and purchase her own vehicle. Ashley Willis was recommended to our Community Works team through her shelter's case manager. Due to their financial situation, her family had been separated and left without transportation, but Ashley held on to hope. For 2 months, she worked with our team to find a job that would suit her family's needs, and in March, she was hired as a phlebotomist with Carter Blood Care. In a quote, she said, "Goodwill put me in a position to utilize the tools that were given to me. The team was always open and available to me and helped me along the way." These are 2 really good examples of the kind of networking and communication that Goodwill Works excels with, both internally and externally. And if I could stress anything at this moment, it would be that no matter what your situation is, Goodwill offers a level of flexibility and compassion that can help individuals find the right path. My final question to Joe was if he had a call to action, if he had a message of hope for anybody facing uncertainty this holiday season.
If you are a person experiencing homelessness, or if you know someone who's experiencing homelessness, or if you know someone who's in danger, don't wait till you're homeless, till you've got that happen. Get in touch with us, call us here at the main office, ask for the Goodwill Works program. We'll get started working with you. It's not, as long as you got those 2 documents, your ID and your social security card, we're going to enroll you. We're going to take you in and help you as best we can. And yeah, like I said, if you're already experiencing homelessness, call us right away. If you're not yet, call us before you are, because maybe we can head that off.
I want to take a second to thank you all for listening to this podcast. It has been a personal highlight for myself this year, and I'm very proud of the stories that we've told. I want to wish you all a happy and safe holiday, and hopefully we'll see you in 2021 with even more success stories to share. Until then, I've been your host, Justin Martinez, and we'll see you in the next episode. You have been listening to GoodCast, a podcast produced by Goodwill Industries of Fort Worth. If you enjoy the show, let us know somewhere on the internet, sign up for our email blast, and maybe share the show with a friend. You can find us on all of your favorite social media platforms, and you can find this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts.